Natividad, also Mr. Sanchez. Yes, Sanchez and Sanchez, no relations. We're going to deal with pre-K first and the updates. That's okay. You're welcome to. Please, you're welcome to. Yeah, and then you're really welcome to stay. Um, okay, this is a pre-K. Hey, this just okay, just in case they come. Thank you very much. Okay, oh yes, please. Thank you. Okay. Well, the Committee on Early Learning, Juvenile Justice, Public Education, and First Generation Initiatives now calls this roundtable meeting to order. Today is Friday, February 19, 2016, and the time is 10:05. For our agenda items, the roundtable discussion with GDOE, Department of Education. What we want to do is follow up relative to the pilot pre-K program as discussed previously at our roundtable that was held February 1st, 2016. We will also do a follow-up on the safety concerns that had been articulated by our community regarding the safety of our students in general and in special education programs. And that was discussed at a roundtable that was held December 4th. Just for the record, notices for this roundtable discussion were disseminated via email to all centers, all main media broadcasting outlets on February 5th, February 12th, and again on February 17th. I just want to welcome all of you who are here, and all of you have taken the time to attend this roundtable meeting. And I thank you again for your presence, every single one of you. I know that you're being taken away from your about 100 other tasks that you're trying to do. So thank you so much, because this is not, we can have a meeting just on our own, but this is really for the general public, because it was the public. It was actually the parents. The grandparents have raised issues regarding the safety of our students, and also about where we are at with the pre-K program, which is a very, very important program. So the committee invited the Guam Department of Education as well as representatives from our community that work in the areas of early childhood development, public safety, behavioral health. So you're all here for the pre-K, and I would like to first of all ask you to please state your name for the record and turn on the microphone, and then we can go around the table. There you go. Thank you.
Good morning, Senator. My name is Rosie Tanatongo, and I am the Vice Chairperson for the Board of Education.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Joe Sanchez. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction.
Good morning, Senator. I'm Zenaida Natividad, Research Planning and Evaluation, Guam DOE.
Good morning. My name is Eloise Sanchez, a school program consultant and also overseeing the pre-kindergarten program. Thank you.
My name is Vera Blas. I am here representing Elaine Ekalawea for the Guam Early Learning Council.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Aye.
Oh, yes, I'm
Sorry. My name is Kathy Schroeder. I'm the Program Director for Head Start.
DOE was provided a transcript and a list of action items during our December. Sorry, I have to repeat myself. DOE was provided a transcript and a list of action items of the December 4th roundtable meeting regarding student safety concerns. We also, just to give you an update, we also had a meeting regarding the concerns that were raised about Race of Hope and DOE IEPs. And so we have had a meeting between GDOE and the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. There were also transcripts of the February 1st roundtable meeting had been completed, but will be provided to DOE. That's regarding the pre-K program. And so let's go ahead and get started with the Guam DOE pilot pre-K program. I believe that first thing in our criteria, in our agenda, was the criteria eligibility for the pre-K students. And the primary concern there was that when we started the pre-K program, it was based on I believe a lottery, and it was based on a first come, first serve. The names were put in a basket, and then it was selected that way. And that didn't necessarily yield comprehensive representation of the student population. And we know that when we are piloting something, especially in education, we want to ensure that we have a stratified representation of our student population. And in particular was that we didn't have students necessarily with disabilities or even those who are gifted and talented. And so at this point, that I would like to give you an opportunity to address that as to whether you have already resolved that issue and how we will move forward with this upcoming school year.
Okay,
So, okay.
Eloise,
Eloise?
go ahead.
Thank you, Senator. And again, based on the February 1st conversation that we had at the roundtable discussion, I'd like to see if we can go ahead and open up the packet and kind of walk you through some of the items that we had addressed.
Is that the one on the left?
Yes, ma'am. It's on the left.
Okay.
So based on the roundtable discussion that we had on February 1st, there were 4 items that you had and the other senators had wanted to take a look at. And the first one, of course, was a program evaluation, and we certainly do have an update for you on that, and Dr. Zenny may speak on that behalf. The other was that you wanted to have us address the 2 areas. One is the early intervention program services that possibly entering pre-kindergarten students may have had or are currently having. And the other was the families, whether or not they're also receiving public assistance. And so that's our attachment B. The other would be the demographic data on the stratification that Dr. Zenny again was able to compile and prepare for your review, and that would be attachment C. The other is the question that was asked earlier also was that what are the projections for the next 4 schools? And Dr. Zenny Natividad also was able to provide that in attachment D. But if I can go ahead and maybe talk about attachment B, and then Dr. Zenny can talk about A, C, and D. On attachment B, last year our application actually indicated just very basic information. It actually had information on child's information, family information, as well as making sure that the families recognize that they certified the information above is correct. Based on what we had talked about the last time, 2 areas that we updated, and just for information here, the ethnicity right now is now with the national standards, and that was with the assistance of RP&E. The item under family information, the last box there, has 2 questions, and we had worked with our legal counsel to ensure that these questions are appropriate, and they gave us the go-ahead to proceed. So for next school year, 2016 and 2017, the first question that we're going to ask our families is, did your child receive or is receiving any early intervention services? And again, working with special education, they were able to provide us with a correct verbiage so that we are asking the questions that we need to ask. This will, if applications are submitted, we will be able to immediately find out whether or not the students are getting these services. The second question is, does your family receive or participate in public assistance programs? And again, this is our way to indicate whether or not the services for those students will need to be provided. And at that point, we can begin looking at numbers, and if there is a stratification of 5% or 10%, then we can use these applications to make those decisions based on submission by the families. So that would pretty much talk about the question that you had asked about, is what criteria is set, and the criteria would be basically the July 30th to include these 2 questions.
Okay, so basically this is The application.
That's correct.
Okay, and that's fine. That covers all the categories. So what would be the process for ensuring that we actually reach as many of our students as possible who may be eligible?
Right. So once we are able to get this approved, then we would be, again, taking a look at the information from Dr. Zenny Natividad to be able to say what percentage of students come from the different categories and use that as our way to be able to determine the criteria.
Okay. So your process for once you get the registration has yet to be determined.
That's correct.
Okay. So to ensure that we are not just that the public is not misinformed that we are picking and choosing, but rather we're really trying to meet the criteria to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to get this.
That's correct.
We had a roundtable. I think it was a public hearing in another matter, and we had our public daycare providers who were here, and they were present. And they also are providing preschool services. And the concern that they had raised with us was that if we are in fact going to implement the universal pre-K program, and this will extend or expand, then it will really hurt the services that they are providing, and it could also have an impact on our economy, because when parents pay, then of course daycare and the pre-K service providers do pay taxes and so on, right? So Dr. Natividad, is there any way in your pilot, your research and your pilot evaluation, is there any way you might be able to extend the study, right, to determine, one, the extent to which there might be a fiscal economic impact, specifically as it relates to those who are providing the services out there in the private sector, our daycare centers. And then the other question that I would like to ask, given that the daycare centers are also providing pre-K services and instruction, and then we are also doing that, whether you might be able to do a comparative study. Now, I'm not familiar with the curriculum, but my understanding is that they have actually gone through quite a bit of training because the standards had been raised. And in fact, I believe, I don't know, Vera, if you're familiar with the pilot program that they had noted that they have specific curriculum and standards. They've gone through training. And the idea here is that I believe if they're certified, then there's a possibility for that certification that would eventually qualify them to receive assistance. I'm just not sure. Maybe that's something that you can look into. Right. So there are two questions, Dr. Natividad, regarding the program evaluation, right? So given that there are services being provided, whether and when you compare the instructional services being provided by DOE and then to those, then maybe we can do a comparative study, right?
Senator, would you like focus on implementation as well as the economic question, or the effectiveness of both programs?
First of all, our first and foremost question would be the extent to which the programs are effective. Because whether they're in the private sector or they're in the public school system, we still want, our goal here is to ensure that our pre-kindergartners are actually ready to learn and that they would have a better chance of success. So that's the first major question. The second question that just came as a result of the input that was provided by the daycare service providers, I think you were there, Kathy, right? Was the extent to which, how how would this then affect the daycare centers? Because they did say, I think there were only 2 students that actually were enrolled in one of the daycares that they actually had left. You know, maybe they didn't have the opportunity. It's not as if we're opening it up. You know, we only had 4 classrooms, so maybe they just didn't have a chance. But that is something. It's my understanding of universal pre-K really is this: that both in the public and private daycare, if they meet the standards, right, then there's some kind of subsidy that is actually provided to the daycare programs. That's my understanding of the universal pre-K, that every child is provided kind of support, and especially those who are at risk. In North Carolina, where I have my grandchildren, and because my daughter has 6 children, her pre-K children actually were subsidized in the daycare, but they had a formalized pre-K program in addition to the pre-K that was actually offered in the public schools. So that's why, you know, I am just wondering, that's going to be very costly, but I think our goal here is to ensure that every child is provided the same opportunity, no matter what their socioeconomic status is. We have Head Start that I know has done a wonderful job over the past 50 years, but we do know that they're also limited. So again, our goal here overall is to really provide as much as we can to every single pre-K students, okay, and get them ready for school and succeed in school. Right.
So I just wanted to say those last set of comments were very important because just like how we approached the question at the last roundtable with Head Start, is we don't view this as a competition with Head Start or even as a competition with the daycare providers. We do know that there are still a large percentage of children who do not go to daycare, right? And I don't know if we have the data on this, but I would venture to say that a lot of times the families who are able to pay for daycare, chances are their children probably go to private school. So we don't know how many of those students go to private school versus public school. And even with the numbers we have now, we don't know how many of these families would intend to go to private school for kindergarten, or would they, or did they choose to pull out of a daycare? So I guess maybe if we get a better handle on that type of data, we'll have a better understanding of what type of financial impact it could have on the daycare centers. But in our planning with the DOE, although the term of universal health daycare for everybody, or pre-K, was brought up, our plans were really just a small number of students, but hitting every school. So our plans haven't gone as far as saying we would make this required for every school and for every student to attend pre-K. But we do want to make the availability there, and that would have to involve the daycare centers, so there would be a lot of communication with them.
There would have to be that.
Because we just don't know if DOE would even have the capacity to provide that type of service for everybody.
Because even right now, as I understand, and well, this is perhaps a good segue to the status of our facilities, because I do know that although our good Vice Speaker had actually provided the funding, the cash may not necessarily have been released in a timely fashion so that they would be, so that you're able to do all of the renovations that were necessary. Right.
That's
so,
correct, Senator.
Yeah, so that really, in the implementation, I know, evaluation, I know that that's going to be part of what would be reported, the extent to which the program was supported financially and in a timely manner, because that can really affect the services and the quality of services that are being provided. Okay, very good. So you will of course inform the community about when the application again will be provided. Now, what I had noticed here is that you are planning, there are 4 more sites, or is that for this upcoming school year, or is that down the road?
That's down the road. So I know that we're
Okay,
still under
thank you.
we're under the almost a status quo with the evaluation taking place. But I know the question came up was if we were to move forward, what would be our next 4 schools? And
Right.
these were the next 4 schools on our schedule.
Okay, and so that's real important to clarify, because I know that at this point, we're barely getting the first 4 schools off the ground, right?
Yep.
So that, I'm not sure, Dr. Natividad, if you even have enough data right now to report. You're probably able to report, okay, this is how many students, but
Just the
it's
demographics.
Just the demographics. So, Mr. Sanchez, you understand then why we are
Absolutely.
wanting to make sure that everything is in place, and we know that, what we need to strengthen before we expand. Yes. Okay. Okay, very good.
Just to,
Yes. Do you have anything else? to
yes,
add?
Senator.
Yes.
I just want to. Well, I thought that was for next school year already, but referring to attachment D, Senator, to assure that the distribution of pre-K
Is it
program
D or
student-
D?
D, sir.
D?
D.
Okay, hang on.
D.
B? B as
as
in
in-
boy, D as in
D
dog.
as in dog.
Okay, here we go.
D.
All right, I have D.
Right. So,
All right.
please pardon the title, because I was under the impression that it's going to be for the next school year, but now I'm understanding that this is for future. However, I just want to discuss the procedure according to what you had requested last time, a stratification by gender, by ESL, by ethnicity, whether in SPED or not SPED. What's not here is whether in GATE or not GATE.
Yes.
What I did, Senator, is I studied the general population demographics of the 4 potential new schools. For example, Inarahan Elementary, general population universe of n is equal to 248, and assuming that we will have n is equal to 18 students in pre-K for that particular school, I stratified the various demographics by gender, so 52% male and 48% female, multiply that by 18%, then you get about 9 and 9 students that are male and female. Similarly, with no ESL and with ESL, we found out that in that particular school, in Iran Elementary School, general population is 88% with no ESL and only 12% with ESL. And so multiply 18 sample by 88% yields 16 students. That should be no ESL, and with ESL 2 students. And so on down the line. Similarly with the ethnic distribution of Chamorro, 90%. Freely associated states,
One.
yes,
Yeah,
1
7%.
student because
Okay.
7%, and so on.
Okay.
So I did that for all the 4 possible schools, 2 projected schools, and noting their general population, of course, and DL Perez, it's a larger population of N is equal to 676, but also assuming that the pre-K will be 18, so multiply the percentages by 18.
But that would be for the new schools.
For the new schools, yes,
Right.
Senator, yes.
Okay, so we have existing schools. You will apply the same methodology for this upcoming school year.
For the upcoming school year. As a matter of fact, Senator, I did an analysis per your request
Yes.
of the current,
Uh-huh.
and it's in attachment C.
Okay.
So, for example, attachment C.
Okay, I have it.
Yes po. For example, in Marshall Sablan, which is one of the pilot schools, I'm sorry I did not put the general population here, but I have those numbers.
You
Male,
don't have the,
Yes,
I
po.
see. Okay, so these were percentages. So you would then,
Yes po.
it would be the same
Yes po.
principle
Yeah.
applied.
Yes po.
Right,
And what I
okay.
did is I just reported the percentages and calculated the difference from general population and what we have in pre-K. So with the
With the current.
yes, but with the current
Yes.
with the current
Okay, got
pre-K.
it. Okay.
So with the relative to gender, we're kind of pretty much on target. Not with ESL.
So,
Not with ESL.
Not with ESL,
And also with the
Not with the
tomorrow,
demographic.
with the ethnicity.
Yes, Senator.
Okay.
So, following that line of reasoning, I applied that to the other three other pilot
Okay.
schools.
So
The-
can we then make sure that the gifted and talented, because I
Yes,
believe
ma'am.
we do have gifted and talented program for pre-K as well, right? Okay, but then if we do have that for gifted and talented,
Then they will not go. Then they'll
and
not
they're
go to
already
this.
receiving services,
Yeah.
right?
So they cannot.
But do they have a waiting list?
Good question.
Is there, do we know, is the gifted and talented program already within under which division? I'm kind of, CNI.
CNI,
Okay,
yes.
so, do you have a waiting list for the gifted and talented?
We can get that information.
Right, okay, because what I'm thinking is that if there's a waiting list, then that can be factored in, provided that they are within,
Yes.
that school,
percentage,
that
yes.
district, right? Or that
Yes,
area. Okay,
Yes, po.
okay, good. Okay, thank you for that. I think that's very clear, and I think the sign is good. Yep, very good.
And Senator,
Yes.
on top of that, we do have Head Start that there are pre-K age also at the different sites.
At other, but do you have the same sites? I mean, that's right. Okay, so they're getting a lot of services. Okay, but for Head Start, you're not in every school. Head Start is not in every school though, right?
We're in all but 4.
Okay. But then the difference is that with Head Start, it's specific to the income level.
Correct.
So you're still serving. So if you have an underrepresentation of those students who are by socioeconomic status, Head Start is actually there in those schools that's already providing that.
And assisting, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay.
Just
So,
want to share with you, Senator, that we have a little bit of challenge collecting data on socioeconomic status because all the elementary schools are now in the SEP program. If you the community eligibility program, where everybody can now have free breakfast and lunch.
yes.
Yeah. So if a school or a district opts to be in the SEP program, the USDA makes it somewhat illegal or
Right,
not really
to ask.
illegal to collect
Yes.
information on free and reduced lunch. So we are looking for alternative measures for SES, and we're still working on that. We cannot directly ask them.
And that is critical because you know what?
Yes,
We have had studies for decades that have shown that
Yes,
for
ma'am.
students who are in the lower socioeconomic status, those who are in the poverty or even below poverty level, those are our students who are at risk,
Yes, po.
right? So to the extent that we can somehow maybe you would need to work with your legal counsel as
Yes,
to
po.
whether
As a-
you might be able to ask for a voluntary, I don't know,
Yes, po.
information, right?
Senator, we actually did that, and maybe Eloise can report on that.
Okay, yes.
It's already in our application that we shared with you earlier. So that was one of the questions that we're asking.
But
And
it's
it is
a
optional.
voluntary, they don't have to.
That's correct.
But then you have to have a disclaimer there that whether they provide it or not should not be a basis for their eligibility.
That's correct. And we actually noted on the application that the information will be used for research purposes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to pause for a minute and to acknowledge Mrs. Gutierrez, who is also a board member. I thank you, and you're welcome to come and join us. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Okay, very good. Okay, let's move along. And so we've covered the criteria eligibility, the number of students on the alternate waiting list. Do we have that? Alternate waiting list.
I don't remember.
We don't
Alternate
have a
waiting
waiting list because, or we don't have a waiting list because for this year because we didn't start yet.
That's right.
Okay.
It's not announced.
Yes.
We have had it.
I think what we tried to ask was whether we had a long waiting list for last year, and I'm not sure. That's not, and I think the reason why we asked that was that we wanted to determine the needs or the demand for it. So would you have that in those schools by any chance? I mean, not now, but for later on? Okay. No problem. Okay, so for RP&E, our research planning and evaluation, the fiscal impact on displacement of children moving from the private daycare to pre-K, I've already addressed that with you. And then with RP&E, the stratified representation of student population, we've addressed that. Okay, very good. We're moving along. And was there anything else?
Evaluation criteria. Oh, okay.
Yes.
We're good.
Okay, very good. Was there anything, Barry, that you wanted to add?
I think
Can you give her the microphone?
I think it's just more along the lines of, ensuring that all the children who would be eligible for pilot pre-K have access to like the registration process. So when we still need to think about, there are still pockets of communities that have, a hard time accessing transportation, so therefore would not probably be able to get to the school sites to register for classes. Then if it's a first come first served basis, then they're going to miss out
see.
on that opportunity. And so we just want to still bring that to the table, to keep it at the back of our minds, that when we're doing the registration process, that we keep in mind that there are still some individuals who may need for the registration to come to them, and then figuring out the whole transportation issue, how we can do that, just still to keep that in mind.
Yes, I thank you for bringing that up because a lot of times we assume that everyone has access, and we do indeed have, and it's those families that we really would like to ensure that they have that equal opportunity to get into the preschool program.
Because I know you had asked earlier about the data of the number of children, who would be eligible for preschool on the island. So there's an average of 3,000 babies born every year. And we get this data through ChildLink with the EDI program, with the Universal Newborn Hearing Screening. Well, every child on Guam needs to have their hearing screened when they are born. So we know that roughly 3,000 babies are born every year. So we have approximately 15,000 children birth to 5. You do an annual survey of all the children who are in early care and education settings. So we include our private child care centers, our family daycare homes. We also include Head Start, early intervention, special ed preschool, our private preschools, and I said Head Start, right?
Head Start.
And so that's approximately 3,000 children. The numbers have gone down in the last 5 years. There used to be over 4,000 children in early childhood settings. Now we're down to a little less than 3,000. And Vince Leon-Girl loves to bring this up when we have these meetings with the data, because he says there's roughly 75% of our children who aren't in any type of early childhood setting.
That's right.
And maybe the question is it because they don't have the access and can't afford it? Either, because the people who can afford it, they can send their children to the private daycare centers.
Yes.
The people who cannot afford it, there are some that would be eligible for our CCDF block grant program.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are still people who fall in between those two that they don't qualify for the services, the public assistance, but they can't quite afford to send their children.
That's
so
right.
where's
Stay
that?
home. Yes.
Where are those
Yes.
children, and what are they doing, and how can we help those pockets of people? And we've been tossing around a few ideas at the Early Learning Council meetings, but we still that's a really big concern. Where are these children? What are they doing? And who's watching them? Because there's a small number of people who they choose to have their children cared for in the home. So they hire a babysitter, or there's still grandma and grandpa at home to take care of them. So those are not the children that we're concerned about. We're concerned about the children who don't have that kind of access, who don't have the opportunities, who don't necessarily have the the availability of services and stuff to them. So those are the ones that we're concerned about.
Right. And that's a large proportion. You're talking about 75%, not in any kind of program.
Right.
So again, it goes back to ensuring that the announcement for the 4 classrooms, even within those, what do you call that? That the school district, the attendance areas, right? The attendance areas, that we do the best that we can to develop a process for reaching out to those who may not be able to, or may not even have the luxury of having television for them to know, right, that they are, so maybe working, if they're receiving public assistance, or, no, it's all just a combination, really, just a combination of factors. Okay, thank you for that, Vera. So noted. Yes. Was there anything else?
Senator,
Yes.
May I share with you? May I share with you this? I went ahead to prepare a logic model for the pre-K program. A logic model outlines
What?
on a single page what the program does, what are the immediate outputs that is within the year of implementation, what are the medium-term outcomes within 2 to 3 years of implementation, and long-term outcome or impact, which are non-measurable. These are our ideals of what they, the long-term impact, I aligned it with the logic model for the GDOE Grand State Strategic Plan,
Okay.
because our goal is
They're
for
all
them to
tied
be
in. Yes,
ready
very
for
good.
life. So
Yes. That's great.
this is just, and in sum, in one sentence, what we are trying to do with the program, with the pre-kinder program, is that, in summary, at the bottom, we, the leadership, staff, and teachers of the Guam Department of Education, seek to prepare, and the prepare are the what we do, if you see the acronym,
Yes.
to prepare pre-kindergarten students so that they will learn immediate outputs through developmentally appropriate practices, and eventually become individuals who are respectful, responsible, and ready for life. The respectful, responsible, and ready for life is actually our
Your 3
vision.
R's.
Yes, po. So
Good.
I have the
Very
ready for life, and the for life is, when they're
Yes.
away from K-12 already, like
K-12,
adults.
so that they either enroll and they're ready to enroll in
College.
post-secondary school and University of Guam or GCC or
a
off
career.
island or be gainfully employed.
Yes po. And either way, we want them to be, letter F, fervent in their diligence and discipline, having acquired the necessary attitudes, behaviors, and worldview from their learning in the social sciences, science, math, PBISC, TT, and STEM. These are the programs of K through 12 GDOE. They are observant of the law, which the Guam legislature passes, deferential to authority, and tolerant of other cultures. They are responsible, respectful, and ready for life. They are lifelong learners. They're independent thinkers, yet capable of collaborative teamwork. They're future leaders, mature in their outlook, preferences, goals in life, and plans to tackle what lies ahead of them beyond the K-12 educational experience. And finally, they are empowered to do right, to be right, and to make the right choices in life. As I mentioned, these are non-measurable. These are what we aspire for them to be.
Yes.
But whether they are in college or whether they are pursuing a career, these are things that we would like to see in our students that are products of K through 12, starting from pre-K.
Yes.
It's a very important year.
Exactly. Yes. That's excellent. This is part of the strategic plan.
Yes, po.
Wow. How clear can we be about what our expectations are? That's great. Thank you. Thank you. And I think that just goes back again. It goes back to, again, as part of the structure by which DOE was given that accreditation, right? First in the nation by WASP. And that's really because part of that is really because of the clarity of your goals and the processes by which you can then monitor, through which you can then achieve these ideals, these goals that we have for our kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And so this then concludes our roundtable for the pre-K. And I look forward to hearing about the announcement, and how I think you've answered all of our questions. And so now,
We'll get you your request on the waiting list this evening.
yeah, the waiting list, if you can just provide, and my office then. Thank you. Thank you again. Okay. So we will now address, your excuse, we will now address safety. And so we have our superintendent of education. We also have the representatives from our Guam Police Department. Thank you very much. Come on in, yes. We also have special education. We have student support services. Wow, I'm almost scared to look at some more reading. Okay. Please feel free to come join me here. Left, right, yes. Okay. Erica can sit here. I give her permission. Okay, if we can have Mrs. Gutierrez, did you want to come? Okay. Do you have everyone here for safety? Okay. Hi, Nadine.
I know it's cold, right? I know it's
I know. We're
We can't
always
complain, right?
we're always struggling with which temperature is best.
This is the original document that was dated
Yes.
November, and this is a response to your question.
Okay, thank you. And you'll go over it, right? Thank you. Okay, we do have everybody here, and we will start by introducing ourselves as we go from left to right. My left, and then round the table. And please be sure that you, since I don't have my colleagues, let me share my 3 microphones. Be sure that when you speak, the light is on.
Nadine Cepeda with GDOE, District Psychologist.
Dan Del Priore with the Guam Federation of Teachers.
My name is Elena Garcia. I'm a concerned grandparent.
Yolanda Gabriel, Division of Special Education.
Doris Bukikosa, Project Director for Programa Nagavli'i DOE.
Rosie Tainatongo, Board of Education Vice Chair.
John Fernandez, Superintendent, Guam Department of Education.
Erica Cruz, Deputy Superintendent, Educational Support and Community Learning.
Good morning, Chris Anderson, Administrator for Student Support Services Division, DOE.
Good morning, Officer Paul Tupal of the Guam Police Department and the Guam Crime Stoppers.
Lieutenant Scott Wade, Guam Police Department, Legal Affairs Section.
Good morning, Sergeant John Bagaforo of the Juvenile Investigation Section, GPD.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us here this morning. What I would like to do is first start off. We have a grandparent who is here and wanted to. Okay, repeat. This is part of being a freshman senator. What I would like to do, everybody, is we have a grandparent, and she is part of our community, who wanted to be able to speak before we start our follow-up questions. So I would like to acknowledge Ms. Elena to please go ahead and share with us your concerns and your information. Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
my concern is,
State your name again.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Senator. My name is Elena Garcia. I am a concerned grandparent.
Okay.
And I would like to address this to the superintendent, if I may.
You
Or
have to
you
address
just
it
want,
to
I'm sorry.
me.
I'm sorry,
Okay,
Senator.
you would
I
have
would
to
like to
address
address
it to
the
me
chair.
directly, not to anyone else. Thank
I
you.
apologize. Okay, Senator, what I wanted to find out, this is my question from my daughter. She would like to be here, but because she works, she's all the way up in Dedido. She can't leave her work because it's very hard to leave the court. And her husband is a lifeguard. Her question was, what are you doing to make things better at the schools? That's her question. Okay, my question was, were there any incidents at the school after my grands were beaten or attacked? Why were the cameras not on the day of the incident? That's my concern. I also wanted to find out, there's so many things that I've been hearing throughout the public, so many concerns about the students. But we cannot just forget, I'm not here, like I said, I'm not here to sue the school, but I want something done because it's affected my grandsons and their sisters. My grandson has been going to the bus stop, okay? He has gone to the bus stop, come right back home. And I didn't find out until about 2 weeks later, and I had to ask him. He goes, Grandma, I hate it there. I asked you if you wanted to transfer. He goes, what's the difference? It's happening all over. These kids still stare them down. Last week, my younger grandson said, I'm going to try my best not to fight back, to protect myself, but I'm going to have to protect myself. What is going to happen to those kids that try to defend themselves? They all get suspended too. And the thing about it is, because this is being addressed to you, I'm bringing this up because I was given the superintendent's number by him. I called and I texted on February 27th because when I found out my grandsons were missing, when he was missing, wasn't going to school because of these issues, I spoke with the principal. I went into the school. I was so shocked with my husband, my granddaughter, when we walked into the school and we went to see the the principal, Ms. Duenas. I asked my grandson, I said, what are all those spotlights? He goes, Grandma, that's GPD. I don't know why we had to go through Guam Airport Police. GPD was right next door. Right next door. And I'm sorry, but it really hurts me as a grandmother and a parent because I know what my daughter is going through. Every day she would ask her kids, her sons, is anybody bothering you? They go, no, but they still do stare at us. But my youngest, it really shocked me. And I did call the superintendent. I texted him on February 27. I got no response back. 27th.
No, today's the 19th only.
I'm sorry, January 27. I take that back. I apologize. Thank you. I'm just emotional. I'm really trying my best. But I had no return call, no text back. Nothing. I tried calling before I met up with the principal. I've been calling. The assistant gave me his direct line. Nobody answers that number. I've left a message. I called DOE and never got anything on their contact number for, I don't understand why TZN does not have a number.
So, I understand your frustration, Elena. Was there, and so we can address that, right? But I'm also here.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. You can also tell me, and you can also communicate that to me. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Well, Senator, I apologize, but you know, it's very heartbreaking.
Yes.
Because my grandson is trying to attend classes at TZN. I had to enroll him at Mozau. The principal said, well, we'll try making him come in 1 week. He's been trying it, but then all of a sudden, again, what do I do? Can I afford counseling for them? And when I bring that up, the first thing he says to me is, I'm not crazy, Grandma. But it's just the thought of just seeing them, because he was so humiliated because he was beaten bad. He was the one with his face messed up. There were other children that were attacked after their incident. And that's why my main concern is what's happening in our schools today is really bad, and I think it needs to be corrected. They need to do more than just suspending these kids, because some of them, they didn't get all of them. We pressed charges on a couple of them, but because they're minors, I can't get their names, because the mom would like to do that. But because we're not allowed to have the names, we can't do it, because they still see those other students there that attacked them.
Okay, so I fully understand. I empathize with you. And as a grandmother, and I certainly know how it can be frustrating, but I can guarantee you we do have our school psychologist who's even present here for the district, right? So I'm sure that there is a way. There isn't anything that is going on right now that we collectively will not be able to address. And so this is why we do have that follow-up. We're having this follow-up. Those questions that you have most likely will be addressed in a larger, not only specific. Now, here's one of my things that I really would like for us to be careful with. We have to ensure that you're the grandmother, but your every student's welfare and there's a level of confidentiality that we also have to maintain, right? And the privacy of other students. So what I would like to do is, I have noted that, but we have the superintendent, we have the representatives from the Guam Police Department, and we also have our board members and the deputies whose sole purpose is really to ensure that every child is safe and that we are held accountable. So we have an opportunity, not just here, but even after this. Go ahead.
Yes, I understand. I am concerned for other students also that are not troublemakers.
I hear you.
That do get attacked.
Okay.
But the thing is, it's affected even my granddaughter that's not even there yet. And she's the next one to go to TZN. She's begging me already not to make her to go to school there.
Okay.
And that's my concern. And I've tried so hard to communicate with the school. I tried calling. I even called Guam DOE. I couldn't believe that they didn't have. Guess what number I got? Ukudu. Ukuru goes, we don't have their number.
Okay, all right. So we'll have an opportunity to address those concerns now. Was there anything else you wanted to make sure that we address?
I want to make sure that the safety of the students come first, also the teachers or any administrator that works in the school. I know that we have so many kids that are really do have problems, but do we forget about them? We have to understand that they are the underprivileged also. They need to be worked with very well. And that is very important to me because not just do I care about my grandkids, any kid that I see, even at the bus stop, doing something wrong, I will approach them. And I even had this one child come up to me when I used to work elsewhere and told me, goes, Mrs. Garcia, I want to thank you for helping me. And I'm trying so hard to help my grandsons because it has affected them emotionally and it also affected both the sisters and the mom. How do we address that? How are we going to fix it? Is it going to be a permanent fix or just a temporary fix? And I think it should be a permanent fix. I know they place school aides there, but even just to pull them from other schools, I think it's wrong. Because the other schools need them too. And I think there should be more SROs. And one thing we forget is for our teachers, I don't have anything against the teachers, but just because you teach them the respect from elementary, it should continue all the way up to the high school. Because we have to remember those kids that do have problems. We cannot forget about them. I can't hate them. I'm hurt for what they did. But I cannot hate those children. And I think that really does need to be addressed with the school. They need to start working with students who have problems. I mean, really working with them. Now it's affected my grandkids and other kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Garcia, and thank you for your courage to continue to bring it to our attention. But like I said, you also can come at any time to see me, right? And I'll provide the kind of assistance and follow through that is necessary. Okay, so just know that every single person, this table, as well as out there in the schools, the other parents and the parents of those of kids who may have assaulted, you also have the same concern. I don't know of any parent who would want their children to grow up to assault other children. I don't know of a parent who would want, or a grandparent who would want, their children to go through what your grandson may be going through. But this is not something that is impossible for us to address, because we have in this not only those who are intelligent, but we have a community that really cares. And every time you share that story, little steps. So we go back again and we're going to re-examine where we may have dropped the ball again so that we can then strengthen the system. But the permanent fix, I believe, Ms. Garcia, that you're talking about is really ensuring that we have a system in place. Because children are going to be children just as adults are. In every situation, we are dealing with individuals who need to learn how to deal with conflicts, right? With differences, with how to deal with the pressures that they are experiencing when they are at home or when they're out with their peers, the kinds of pressures that we can't even measure at this point, because when we were growing up, it was a different type of environment. So I have a lot of hope, because as you communicate, and then we have educators who continue to keep coming back and then just working at the situation. We have our police department, our fire department, all the first responders, the first thing that they want is to make sure, because any of that, anyone's child can get hurt, and whether it's ours or not, we're still very concerned. So I want to assure you of that. I want to assure you that in spite of maybe it didn't happen, and maybe then calls for us to then examine, did we reach out enough? Can we then utilize our school psychologists to then work one-on-one? And if your grandson is not receptive to that person, maybe there are other ways, but I'm sure there's going to be a way by which we can start the healing, right? And that's what we're aiming for. Yeah. Okay. So if I may now turn over to our superintendent.
First one, I apologize if you tried to reach me at my number. I didn't see it on here, but I don't know if there's anything that might have happened. What I will say is, for the benefit of the public and for the benefit of everyone at this table, you can reach me at my phone number. It's 488-8348. That's 488-8348, at the risk of having numerous more voicemail than messages. I am easier to reach by text message than by voicemail. That might be an issue. My phone number at work, the best way to reach me is 300-1547, 300-1547. If it rings on my desk and I don't pick up, my assistant should pick it up, but please try there. To email me, you can email directly at johnfernandez@gdoe.net. That is JONFERNANDEZ@gdoe.net, and that'll come directly to me. You may copy my assistant, Maria Roberto, at MDROBERTO@gdoe.net. You can find me on Facebook under John Fernandez. You can find me on Twitter under JFERNAND19, JFernand19. So this is just for the public. If you want to reach me, if there's an issue and concern, find all different ways to reach me. I apologize if I don't get back to you in a timely manner. I will try my best, but I at least want to know that you're able to get through to somebody. And usually, if it's an issue that needs to be looked into, I will send it to a deputy or somebody to kind of take it on. And so I just want to make sure that at least for the public record that you can put this out there, and we'll see if my data plan is sufficient to cover that. The other issue I would suggest, Madam Chair, is that the issue has come up several times, and I know that I have followed up through my deputy to the school on the status of your grandchildren. I would suggest, if there is continued dissatisfaction, that we find a way to have this conversation, which we cannot have here because of the confidentiality issues, because of the issue of the parent and guardianship of the children needing to have a parent at the table. There are ways, if we get your legal counsel and my lawyers together, to make sure that we don't violate confidentiality, and it may require a waiver of confidentiality from the parent or the student, if the student is 18 or older, and sit down at the table and try to see what else we can do to support the students. We do have that follow-up, and I've just double-checked to update it as much as possible with regard to the conversation between the school parent regarding the two boys, your two grandchildren, over there, and we cannot report that out here. So what I'd like to say, if there is an interest in doing that, we do need to follow the rules, and there are steps that we can take, but we should get our lawyers involved to just make sure that we don't violate those restrictions. Otherwise, all the general issues that you raise, I appreciate you raising them, because those are the very issues that trouble all of us as we struggle to deal with every situation in the school, how to deal with the kids who are showing repeat behaviors that we need to address, having to deal with the victims and the students who are not involved. All of them are our responsibility. Our ability to support cameras in the school and the resources needed to address that, as you know, we've been pushing to try to figure out resources just to support those efforts. Our ability to deal with what happens at home and how that gets into the schools, and how we deal with the community issues that get into that we see every day show up in our schools. How we deal with training for teachers, administrators, and staff with regard to how to enforce discipline and how to provide support. And that's something that's an ongoing discussion, and we have our district psychologists here who hopefully we can start to talk about those issues, about what we can do on the school-based, from a school-based side to provide services to the students who we are seeing in need of those services, not just through our school psychologists. We have special education here, and then a number of our partners. So those issues, for sure, are public policy discussions and issues that we can hopefully address here through the course of this roundtable. And but it is also a continued work in progress, because some of the issues raised at the last roundtable, we had said, I think we have a good structure to address. Some of the issues which we will follow up today, we know there are opportunities to improve. And so I think that discussion that we're having will continue to lead us to more improvements, to recognizing where we have opportunities to continue being more effective, to identify challenges that we have not yet had the capacity or resources to address, and to identify the needs that we will need going forward that we can work on with the legislature and the governor to see if we can build those supports in. So all of those general issues, those issues I hope we can cover today, and so on that level. With regard to your specific, the grandchildren, if we can find a different way to do that, I'm happy to work and find a way. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And I think with Mrs. Garcia's concerns, she had noted that maybe concerns may be affecting other children as well. So fully understand that. So let's go back then. I believe I had provided you with a transcript and then a list of items that were addressed and we needed to have the follow-up on. This is the one that you want. Okay.
So you have before you, Senator, the packet. You had what it includes. It looks voluminous, but it actually is the packet we submitted earlier.
Yes.
So just to make sure you had that copy, and
yes,
then
I have
some responses to some of the follow-ups. So before we do that, and just for the record, in December when we were called to address the issues and concerns regarding school safety, and I think we had the opportunity to address, I would say, 4 major areas. Number one was several major areas. One was, were there systems and supports in place to address student safety? And we were able to talk about what we were doing on that front with regard to PBIS, with regard to board policies, with regard to partnerships with GPD, the judiciary, the teachers union, as well as on the facility side. So we were able to address, the systems and supports that were in place. The other area that was mentioned.
Excuse me, just one moment. Could I have a copy of this?
Sorry. The other.
Does anyone else?
We can make so this is
one.
Right. The top is the new submission. It's just really.
Anyone else need a copy?
And then the binder was the old.
Yeah. Barry, or
so you can make copies of those.
Can we? Just so that.
So I'll just intro
can follow along. Can we just take a...
Well, what I'll do is, I'm not addressing that right now. What I want to do is just kind of cover the overall issues that we have already come to the table to give you time to make copies. But I just want to say, because this is a continuation of a discussion that we had in December. And so last time we started with, because I want to kind of recount where we are today, and then because then we're going to do is pick up from there and go forward as to what's new. Number one was we talked about the systems and supports in place to address student safety, about the expansion of our positive behavioral intervention and supports framework (PBIS), from which started at our middle schools, now to all elementary schools and to all high schools. And as we recall, PBIS involves being very explicit about the behavioral expectations at school, acknowledging positive behavior, being very clear about the consequences for violating those behavioral expectations, and the use of data to monitor our progress and to provide opportunities to improve how we serve and supported students at all areas of the continuum. At that point, we discussed board policies related to safety, especially our Student Conduct Procedures Manual. We discussed partnerships with the judiciary on the SROs, school safety ambassadors, and play by the rules, as well as with our GPD partners in terms of how we respond to incidents and how we promote positive behavior and partnership through programs like Crime Stoppers. We also provided an update on our school facilities with regard to how we are at least trying to ensure a safer school environment through the work on facilities, including the $100 million in the RFP that will start with Simon Sanchez, and that's an ongoing procurement, as well as $5 million by the Department of Interior that we will soon be able to use to address health and safety issues. And then, of course, recently, which is new, is the fact that we completed working with GSA to secure our schools procurement.
Yes.
And we'll be starting, well, actually the notice to proceed went out on February 3rd to allow us to begin phase 1 of installing security equipment in our schools. This is a project that has 6 phases, each of them lasting 60 days by contract. And in each phase, we serve about 5 or 6 schools at a time concurrently. And then with those, as we go through the 6 phases, that'll take us through 1 year to get all schools addressed. And we'll be starting with our most vulnerable schools based on the data.
Okay.
So we did that about what systems and supports were in place, and of course, always looking at ways to improve. The second issue I thought was that we talked about was training.
Yes.
And what type of training, even if you have the systems and supports in place, if our employees are not trained to really be able to implement what we are putting in place, it's not going to be effective. So we provided it in your packet a host of a list of the trainings that were that are normally provided to staff at all levels to support student safety. And I think we can go into more detail once we get into the meat of it with regard to what other training has taken place since December, and especially those that are focused on the areas that we raised back at that roundtable. The third major area that we discussed were the supports for students with special needs, and again we provided not just the trainings. We also, and we can talk a little bit about the trainings. We're also working on some partnerships that I hope will help us address students with behavioral issues, with persistent behavioral issues, and we're working with counselors. We're working with our partner agencies, our school psychologists, to determine if we can, and if and how we can start to deliver more school-based support. And I think that was one of the issues raised about what happens to the students who are going through these issues and which are manifesting themselves in negative behavior. So it isn't really a policy of pushing them out and not attending to them. We're trying to figure a way to support them in school. We asked about, we talked about supports for student victims, and that was a good question and issue raised about what happens after the fact, after, because I think we talked a little bit about protocols. What happens when an incident occurs? How do you address it? How do we mete out discipline? And what happens in the course of that immediate response? I think the question about what happens down the road afterwards, after students come back, what do we do with those who are victims of these? That's what I talked about with school-based services, taking a closer look at what we're doing now, what we can improve on, because that is a very relevant factor, that it doesn't end on day one or after the discipline happens. There are other things we need to do to address that. And then, and I think those are the 4 major areas: what systems and supports, training, support for students with special needs, and then supports for students who are victims of or who are victims of these types of issues. And so that's what you have in your packet. And then we can, if you want to take a break until everyone has a copy, we can do so. But we followed up on that packet, and there was a request for some status updates, and we can go through that in some detail.
Okay, where are we at with Anita? They're still making copies, so we don't want the whole packet, but just at least just so we have a framework for following. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. I think what I would like to address first and foremost is the follow-up after the incident occurs, right? So that's what you are saying is under discussion right now, Superintendent, so that the schools are trained to not just assume that everything is okay because the perpetrators or those who had committed the assault has actually gone through been suspended or whatever disciplinary action had taken, but that there's actually a means for monitoring when students come back, right?
So the area of concern and the area where I think is an area of growth for the department is providing the necessary support for anyone who, the after incident, the post-incident supports. And that takes a lot. I mean, I think we also have to recognize our limitations. I mean, there are things that we are able to do in the schools, and we're asked to do more and more to address issues that may have stemmed from school, may have stemmed from outside of school. We are still looking at ways that we can be a positive, support in those areas. I think number one, and we can. This is going to be a little bit difficult to kind of walk through because there are many different types of post-incident issues, right? But just say for the immediate safety of students, one of the concerns will be, of course, around making sure these incidents don't happen again. So we did request in our budget opportunities for more support at the school sites in terms of supervision, and that's one very basic, easy way to look at the situation. If we're trying to monitor student behavior, hopefully the security equipment might also serve as a monitoring device, but really the adults on campus and having more supports, especially at our larger schools, will help at least have a physical presence there in terms of adults. We talked about SROs and being involved in terms of their presence. Now we want to recognize that we've been limited in terms of our ability to expand. It's a costly program, and we're reviewing it right now, and we can talk a little bit about where we might be with that program, but it's been very difficult to expand just because of the costs, and the costs, of course, went up with the Competitive Wage Act, and it's not an easy program to expand, but we are looking at ways that we can work, whether it's with our school attendance officers, whether it's with our SROs, and with additional school aides, to provide at least the manpower on campus to provide that immediate, visible response. Right. Now, that's with regard to monitoring and preventing behavior, but that's not always going to be as successful. The second issue that we sometimes see is when there are underlying issues that lead to the incidents themselves. So whether it's gang related, whether it's girl related, whether it's boyfriend related, there are a number of issues that may lead to an incident, a violent incident, that we also want to be aware of. So part of that is making sure that when the students come back, that's not a persistent issue that may lead to more to a recurrence of that incident. So I think part of that is looking at we talked a little bit about restorative justice as one option to try to address and try to work with administrators to implement restorative justice. In our current grant, consolidated grant application, we have set aside some resources for that, and we're going to once we get that approval, which we hope will be come imminently, that is one of the components that is in that grant to try to promote, as some suggested, restorative justice processes and supports at our schools. We, in addition to that...
Before you go on, just for the general public, can you please describe restorative justice?
Well, we're really looking at...
It's just not for me.
Right. I think the idea is to be able to mediate and come to a resolution between those who are involved in an incident. So that's really the concept, is to find an opportunity for peers to mediate and to come to a resolution of the underlying problem, so that it's not something that says it's a fight, go suspend, and you go over and then come back, and we haven't addressed the underlying problem. So looking for opportunities to build that kind of mechanism. I know that it has existed in the past, but we want to see if there's an opportunity for us to continue to address
problem solving, conflict resolution.
Conflict resolution, peer mediation, right.
Yes.
Right. I would say that, as part of that as well, with through PBIS, I guess so that we're talking about incidents. Right. So through PBIS, as we start to see these incidents and we start to identify students who are repeat offenders, to determine whether there are supports and interventions that are needed to support those students. So as I mentioned, we started with PBIS at the middle school. We expanded it to elementary school, and we're just in the process of having that expansion take place in high school, which is really where we're seeing a lot of the issues that are making it to, out in public because of the visibility and the age of these students.
Do we have it in elementary?
It is in all elementary schools,
elementary.
right?
Okay, yeah.
Right, so it's
middle and high school.
Correct. So now we're in high school, and that means there's still implementation that is happening, but within that, I think within that structure, what we're talking about is collecting data and utilizing that data and understanding who the students are that are in need of additional attention and focus and supports and services, if there are ways to change the trajectory of their behavior. And so I think that's what we are working on with our counselors. If you want us to talk more about that, we can talk about what we're calling Project Inadahi, working with Ifamagunta. We can talk about our district psychologist, can talk a little bit about the work she's trying to start with our counselors. Those are going to be for the Tier 2, Tier 3 individuals, because as we mentioned, most of our students are not engaged in this conduct, in the conduct that we're really here to talk about. But those that are engaged in it can be highly disruptive and disproportionately disruptive. So we can't turn a blind eye to them. The question is, what do we do and how do we figure out ways to break the cycle of misconduct so that they can become productive members of their school communities? So that's something that we talked about. Last time we talked about it, we mentioned school-based mental health services as the kind of catchword for what we said we were in need of. But I think after that, there were several, pieces of move forward to see if we could actually, number one, strengthen our partnership with Ifamagunta in a way that made sense to ensure that students are really served. And then number two, really focusing on what types of services we can address within our schools and school facilities. And that's, again, a district psychologist came in and she heard that and she ran off and said, let's figure out ways to do it. So I'm very, very happy to have that type of initiative, but now we need to kind of figure out, what are we going to be able to do to provide that type of service and support.
So I took a look at your data and the type of disciplinary, the violations, right, types of violations. And clearly, if you take a look at that, and the ones that has the most prevalent or has the highest distribution or frequency, it really has to do with respecting others, respecting authority, respecting themselves. It really has to do about relationships. And there seems to be a breakdown of that. And again, we don't want to seem like that old grandparent in our days, right? But when we're talking about that, because it's true, you can have all kinds of interventions, you can have all kinds of programs, but this is where the pre-K program and the elementary school curriculum has to somehow be re-examined, or even for us to see where we may be missing it in terms of passing on the values of respect, self-respect, starting with self-respect, because they have noted before, if you don't have it, you can't give it out. So if you don't respect yourself, you can't respect other people. That's just something very simple. And it may sound philosophical, but it's really true. You can't give away or give others that which you don't possess. So what I had noticed, Superintendent, is that, the large proportion, it's not about just, I think there were some numbers that had to do with, even insubordination, or there was, just as a whole, our kids are demonstrating that they're not, for those, the highest incidence is really about not having the value of respecting themselves and others.
That is absolutely correct. I don't have I'm not looking at it, but if you cite it offhand, the repeat top offenses are going to be defiance and insubordination,
That's right.
physical aggression, things like dress uniform violations, use of tobacco. So we have a number.
The use of tobacco is not as much as
No,
all those
absolutely,
others.
but they're in the top. They're in those top five, and so it's not just about the physical safety. We're having a number of other issues, and again, let me also just reemphasize, because I really am, and you know me, I am really about. We can do it. We can take this on and we can address it. I'm always optimistic that we have the capacity within the school system. But when we're talking about respect, and we're talking about, that's really what it is. We're talking about respect. This is not something that can only be taught in school.
That's right.
And it's not something that can that can only be reinforced in school. I think that is something that we want to continue to try to reinforce. But the challenge is that we are talking about a community issue, a cultural issue from the standpoint of our modern age, where every kid has access to all sorts of influences from here on island and off island. And what we're saying to the schools right now is teach your kids respect. Well, we're going to do our best, and we have to put in the systems and supports to do that. But it really is, taking on a responsibility that is all of our responsibilities for the, when I say adults on Guam. So how do we address that? We're going to try to figure out what we can do, and PBIS is one of the structures. But again, it's a community effort that needs to take place here.
Yes, it's a larger problem, but it is the schools is a microcosm of our community.
Yes.
Everything that we experience in school, I'm sure that from the public safety, what you see in school, what's starting in school, you see it in larger measure in the community. And so this is why that even becomes far more important. PBIS has been around for a while. It has been around for many years. And I am just wondering whether we have done some kind of an evaluation about the effectiveness of this program. Because, we can have wonderful curriculum, and we can teach it, but if it doesn't have the outcomes of what it intended to do. So do you have that, Doris?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Senator, I do. There's been some reports that we have put out. We made it available to the superintendent, the deputies, and the board members. I'm sure we can get you copies of them as well. Nationwide, we're actually falling below the percentage, the national percentage, the average. So when we say comparing ourselves, we're actually doing quite well.
In terms of the disciplinary
problems. Occurrences, correct.
Wow.
Yeah, so nationwide we are actually below. I think there's only one area that we ranked comparative or similar to. The other areas, everything was below the national mark. Again, we started in middle schools. This was actually, I want to say, a pet project that Erica Cruz actually was very involved in. And we've been doing it for at least, I want to say, 7 years. It's year 4 in elementaries. So again, that's still kind of an infancy stage. In the elementary.
Okay.
And really this is, we say year 1 in high school, but because of our the approval for our funding with the CG hasn't yet to come through, we haven't officially launched it in high schools. We've done training, basically overview and just initiation.
Was that? Is that the consolidated
correct,
grant?
Correct, for CG15, the application. I think you're aware of that, Senator.
Okay.
So again, we've just made the initial attempts going into the school, letting them know what PBIS is about, et cetera. So, the students would be very knowledgeable of it because they've experienced it in the middle schools. Now it's actually the personnel, the school staff, the community directly there at the school to understand what PBIS and actually doing the framework in it. So all of these interventions we're talking about is very much consistent with PBIS. We're just doing it in silos. So helping them understand all of these supports and interventions actually works with the framework. It's starting with teaching the children or the students all of the expectations, the appropriate behaviors, and then what those consistent consequences are.
So, yes, I recall that we started this in the middle school.
Yes.
And, we're just talking here, right? So we would think that, if we expanded it to the elementary, then that would be something you wanted to add to that. Yes.
Good morning, Madam Senator. Officer Paul Tsupao with the Guam Police and the Guam Crime Stopper. And being with the Guam Crime Stoppers program, we've adopted through the passage of then Senator Eileen Yamashita with the School Crime Stoppers program. We've been integrating the School Crime Stoppers program for the last 3 to 4 years within the public schools. And within the elementary level, we're starting to see the effects of the combination of the School Crime Stoppers program and the PBS program, where schools are now offsetting different, they're taking upon themselves to different initiatives such as forming the Youth Crime Watch program. And one of the effective schools that is actually doing that is Tumbo Elementary School with Mr. Derek Santos and Bryce O'Connor as the advisor. And the way that program is running is that they're taking the concept of PBIS, the positive reinforcement of respect, responsibility, and safety, and they're giving the leadership to the students, the fifth graders, which the program consists of fourth graders wanting to show interest. Is so overwhelming that they have over 40 to 50 students wanting to be in the Youth Crime Watch program. And I was just there yesterday, and I saw the kids just interacting within the breaks that they had with lunch recess and, of course, the recess time. And the effectiveness of the PBS program and different programs that are offsetting off of that, we're starting to see that flourish. And with the School Crime Stoppers program, we also bring it into the middle school. And again, PBIS is reinforced with being a responsible student by reporting crime within the school and respecting, of course, others. And we're starting to see that with its infancy stage within the high school. So it all starts with the program, starting at elementary, middle, and high school. So if I can speak testimony of the effectiveness of the PBIS, I'm starting to see it from a law enforcement standpoint. And, with the recent bomb threats, we were inundated with calls with students just wanting to make a difference by providing information to our juvenile investigators. So we're starting to see a lot of the kids coming forward and taking responsibility for their school.
Wow. Thank you for that information, and that's really encouraging. And so, Superintendent, when you're talking about the need, I know this is supported by the consolidated grant, and that's the primary funding source for that, right?
Yes.
Right, it's a district-wide initiative at this point, and the issue is it's really about capacity building. So what we're doing is a lot of training and reinforcement, and once the whole concept is to embed the framework into how we address our students. And I think starting at middle school was that was the right start, and then as we expanded it, after we saw the results in middle school, expanding it to both elementary and high school, is acknowledging the fact that even though we want to intervene and we want to teach our students, we're really talking about almost relationships, right? That's what it is. The nature of those relationships change.
Yes.
But the nature of those relationships and the change in those relationships don't end in elementary, middle, and high school. They go into adulthood, and many adults have the same issues of having to deal with relationships. So I think making this a district-wide initiative and not assuming that we're done with our job in 8th grade and so forth, we just need to figure out what is appropriate in the elementary school, what is an appropriate way to address behavior in middle and high school, as you start to see our younger students trying to figure out how to get along with others. As they get older and they start to realize there are different natures to these relationships, and you see boyfriends and girlfriends and other things coming up, about. And then when you get into high school, when you're really talking about the engagement of students in their own education and their focus on graduation, we see a lot of disengagement that becomes an issue in high school, about students who are at some point they're not feeling engaged and feeling successful and feeling that they're going to have an opportunity to succeed. So it'll all take different shape, and PBIS is the framework to be very clear about what those behavioral expectations are at every level, and then how we're going to address and to again the key piece is acknowledging positive behavior and encouraging and incentivizing positive behavior, because we see that in many of our students. We want to highlight that.
Yes.
And then how do we deal with students who are going to be more chronic offenders or repeat offenders, that we need to really figure out what's going on.
Before I go on, I want to acknowledge the presence of the board chair, Ms. Luz and Nicholas. Thank you for joining us. So the training, I think, is also, is it school-wide, or is it just, it includes the teachers and it includes the support staff?
That is correct.
Yes. So it's all comprehensive.
Correct.
Everyone knows how to reinforce the students. It's
Correct.
not just in the classroom or the school counselor or the school psychologist. That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
And what we're actually hoping to do with the expansion is to actually go to the homes. So we've actually done some level of training with parents about PBIS in the
that's
homes, teaching them about expectations and how to set that up at home. So there's some structures in place.
In addition to that, we provide training to our DPW partners, our bus drivers, as well.
Okay,
so
that's
it also
right.
extends to our bus drivers.
Everyone has contacts, so we should continue that to the grocery stores and the community as a whole. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. All of us, island-wide, including us in the legislature. Okay, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And that provides us a sense of encouragement, really, and because it takes a while, but if we just stay with it. PBIS was started, 7 or 10 years ago?
It's like early 2000.
Early 2000. Here we are, 2016. But we're now seeing the effects of that. There are still isolated areas, and we still pay attention to that. But I believe that if we expand it to the elementary so that this is really district-wide and we view our school as that model for the community, then, Ms. Garcia, I believe that we have a lot of hope here.
So if I could offer, we talked about that general framework, but but the real concern that we also raised was, after you've done all of that structuring and supporting and training and implementation, we're still going to have students who are showing a different level of need in terms of attention and focus and support. So if I could ask if you would kindly let her give us an update on what she's trying to. And what our district psychologist is trying to do with regard to Project Inadahi, as well as the conversations we've started with the counselors about the services for those particular students.
So Project Inadahi is Project Be Careful or Careful? I'm just trying to translate in my mind what Inadahi is like. Isn't that care?
It's to care. It's to care.
Okay, Project Care. To care.
To care.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so
state your name.
Nadine Cepeda.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator. I actually have a behavioral health background. So coming into the schools, the latest things when I've gone to so many functions in Washington, D.C., SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So school-based mental health has been around for the last 12 to 15 years. And so coming with that and knowing what that entails, we know that people in special education are 5% that are the most need and most intense care. And those are usually with SPED services. Then there's a 15 to 20%, and those are the high-risk children with conduct who have not been identified but have been getting our problematic behaviors. Those are the ones that school-based mental health wants to target. So coming into this, we're limited with resources. However, the counselors have a master's degree. They need training, and I can supervise. So I had proposed to the superintendent, we need to get and capture those kids that are 15 to 20%. With that, we know that coming from Guam Behavioral Health, they don't come in. They don't engage because they don't have means of transportation, other things that factor in. So what best school-based mental health is, you put it in the site. You have the family come in. So this, again, will be interns. We have 2 current counselors, school guidance counselors, who are licensed professional counselors. And then I'm proposing to the superintendent with one of the initiatives is to have 8 people that I can supervise in group that can be interns, but at the site based on the data from Power School. Again, because there's only 10, to place them at the school site, which is the highest rate of disruptive or aggression and so forth. And that's who they're going to focus on. They're going to focus, if they have to go out to the home with the parent, we all know it starts from home. You have to work with the family. So with elementary, it'll be more prevention. Then it'll be, again, 2 people in the elementary, highest rate of, aggression or whatever behavior that the school, Power School identifies. Middle school, then before, they become developmental, they start to identify. Peers have huge influence. And so this is when you start to see the behaviors really become disruptive. So they'll have 4 counselors in the middle school. High school, then they become, again, if they're not corrected and don't give them the kind of direction they need, then the behaviors actually increase. And so we'll put another 4 into the high schools. And so with that, we can provide individual, group, and family counseling, to include that they have to go out to the home. And because we know that it's the system, meaning the family system, and I'm sorry, coming from a therapeutic background, we know that it starts with family, and we have to engage them. And that's the key. Not to say this is going to solve problems, however, the data that I see from SAMHSA that is available, it does increase. Now, it's going to be difficult. It's something new, but it's something I'm familiar with. And I think we can really capture the ones that have not been identified or keep getting in trouble, DAC, right? And so those are the things to say we have to treat this Right, and that's how we're going to identify them. So in Adahi, the school-based mental health is one component that's going to be under in Adahi, because in Adahi is working closely with Guam Behavioral Health. IFA Magunta is a program that really looks at serious emotionally disturbed. We know that for some reason I've worked, they have 400 active clients. We know there's far more. However, they can't go there for whatever means. We'll make it easier to say, hey, we're at your school site. I'm currently doing that now. I came from the court. I'm seeing some very difficult cases that I transferred from, and I actually approached my administrator, Mr. Anderson, to say, the child called me. He's a student in Ontalon. Said, Miss, I have not gotten any services. A very difficult case, and Mr. Anderson, go ahead. So I'm actually even implementing the school-based mental health. I've done home visits. It's something I'm familiar with. So it starts with that, to know that the family, rapport building. No one's going to trust you if you don't have that connection or trust.
So Senator, as you can hear, there is a desire to try to solve that issue. And now IFA Magunta has been a partner with us in this, but over the past 4 years that I've been here, it has been a recurring issue about, number one, sometimes it's this idea of over-referral, that we are over-referring our students. What that means to me is there are something happening at the school site which our administrators and faculty and staff don't feel that they have the capacity to address. Right. Yet IFA Magunta might say that it's not an appropriate referral. So those are issues we've been working on in the past. The second issue is when you are properly referred in need of services, you may not be getting those services because it's not easy to access the services because of transportation issues and so forth. So the two things that I think we're trying to build here is, number one, I hate to see it when we have kids moved out of our schools because it gives us a limited ability to continue our work with the students. So trying to have something that's school-based is important, and then the capacity to provide the level of services, whether in partnership or within the organization. Here's the catch. The catch is we're very lucky to have a district psychologist who has the background and some counselors who are willing to serve. But this is an issue that we cannot, it's not a volunteer pieces, but it's like we're taking the initiative to pilot this, but it does take resources to build and to sustain. Because if the personnel change here, we're really relying on the initiative and the training. It's continuous and expanded training, ensuring we have the capacity from being able to provide the services and the clinical background and expertise that's needed. If we're going to do this, we can start with the pilot program that identifies the top schools, but again, we're almost lucky to be here where the human capital, the need, and the timing is just right. It's not a guarantee that we can continue that without structure and resources to make sure that it is, we can build and sustain that type of effort. So what we're seeing here is an attempt to structure something and to pilot it, but we recognize that there's a need there, and I think I feel more comfortable when the students remain in our schools if we can serve them better. But it's difficult if we keep them in school but we can't serve them, or push them out and they're not getting services, and the kids get lost in between. So that's really something we're trying to address.
But I think what's also real important is the component of involving the families, because you just know that you can't fix one part and all the adjustments, otherwise then it goes right back to behavior. So there has to be that component. So I'm just curious, who are involved with it? Is it the school counselors who, if you were to have this school-based mental health services, who would be involved with that team? Would it be the school counselors and training, or it has to be the certified clinical psychologist?
Okay, so and I'm actually the president of IMT, Association of Individual Marriage Family Therapists. So there is a law that was passed 2 years ago and has made it standardized with national standards. So I've taken it on where I would like to supervise them. Because of limited resources, we don't have people knocking on the door who are licensed. And that is the reason why the school counselors are only providing supportive counseling. Since I've been here, I've been pushing a lot of assessment, because it technically is, how can you drive and help a student work on education if you're missing a lot of the things that if you're not trained for to see? So that's the key, and I've been working really hard with the counselors, not to say clinical, but you need to capture it, because then you're going to miss everything else. You need to be healthy, mind, body, and spirit,
Okay.
Exactly, and that's why there's only going to be 2 in the elementary, because it's prevention. When you get to middle school, then it becomes intervention. And
Yes.
so that's the understanding, and the data actually supports that. And I can provide that to you. I just got to print it out from SAMHSA. But once again, it goes back to the family and the schools. It's actually the school counselors that are going to be doing this. And a lot of them are interested, but again, it takes 3,000 hours, and they have to sit for a test. And that's the reason why we said interns. But there are 2 licensed guidance counselors who want to get on board with this as well.
If I could say a more general comment about the counselors, because they're an important component and can be important from this particular initiative. But in general, in supporting the the emotional behavioral issues that our students face, throughout the system. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is think through how we might structure the way we train and improve the level of counseling services at all of our schools. So we just recently adopted the ASCA model as a way to standardize what it is we expect from our counselors. They've been working on that for like 10 years or 11 years.
Counselor
Association, right?
Association.
American School Counselors. Association of American School Counselors.
That's right. Okay, sorry. So, but now that those standards are in place, I think we're looking at ways to help, really kind of set the expectations as to what types of counseling services we need across the school system, and then make sure that we can move all of our counselors to that level of expectation at the same time. The counselors are asking for it. They want more. They like the coordinated professional development. They like to be pushed to really ensure that they're meeting our expectations. But before, it was really school by school, as you could see where the counselors are being used. Now we're really talking about having the capacity to help our students develop emotionally, but at the end of the day also be able to be prepared to be productive citizens with college and career ready opportunities. And so that's an ongoing discussion, because it's part of this, but it's part of the overall picture of how counselors are going to be able to serve our students.
Expanded roles and responsibilities. More training.
Right.
And then the changing. Wow. Okay. So can I just go back to just here? I understand that you requested, this is policy-wise in the budget, funding for 143 more school aides, and that would then, what you have identified, this additional will help with the monitoring, the supervision, the kind of needs that had come up.
There are two components to that, actually, and I believe 80 of them are
for
one-to-one aides, and the remainder are for they're all full-time. They're all going to be full-time aides, but I want to make sure we clarify that, because we talked about support for students with special needs, and we talked about one-to-one aides last time, and the part-time nature of their employment and the full-time nature that might be looked at.
Right.
Well, the issue right now is a more practical funding issue. So with the implementation of the Competitive Wage Act, but the lack of any increase in our special education budget, in order to provide the level of services that we are currently providing, we are going to need to cover those services, at least provided by the one-to-one aides, within our local budget. So we are requesting that level of support to be able to meet the current need of our students.
One-to-one school aides.
So that's the
for
request.
Students who need the one-to-one school aides. Right. And so the 80 here is really not 80 additional school aides.
It is, no, these are,
are
let me just,
meeting the needs of the
current.
Right. And they used to be funded by special education, because I remember at one time, I think we were spending up to $7 million. It's
about $6 million, right?
Yeah, right. Okay, so now that alone cannot handle that funding.
Correct.
So this is a supplement. I mean, okay.
Meaning if we weren't able to hire 80 one-to-one aides, that's 80 less one-to-one aides that we would be able to support under the existing
80 students who will not have
who will then not have a
one-to-one
one-to-one
school aid. But you're still funding
This year.
one-to-one school aids. How many how many students need one-to-one school aids, Mrs. Gabriel?
Currently, we have 293 students that are in need of one-to-one support.
That's really a lot.
We have 7 new ones that have not, support. Apparently, we have close to 355 personnel that are a combination of program aides that supports special education, regional programs, and also one-to-one. So that's a total of 355 right now.
You know, we've spoken about this before, and it's really a tight balance between meeting the individual needs of our students and, providing the resources. But I'm going to go, since we're talking about the national level, right? At the national level, you know that we have been reported to be an outlier in terms of the number of one-to-one school aids that we are identifying for our students. You are aware of that. That was noted in the Evergreen,
Yes.
right? That had been noted by the U.S. Department of Education, Special Education Division, right? So one of the questions that had been asked, and I will ask again today, is what structure, what system do we have in place to ensure that we have a means through which our students are needing the one-to-one school aids initially in the elementary school are actually weaned from the one-to-one school aids? Because you know what? I can almost guarantee that we have students who have had one-to-one school aids from the time that they were in the elementary all the way. And so what will happen? What happens when they leave our school system, right? Because their parents are going to be working. And so ideally, the program is really supposed to make sure that our students can function independently, even
Correct.
with the special needs that they possess.
So, yes, and we've talked about this in the past, and it's something that we're, to be honest, it's something that's going to hit us really quickly about how we do this. Except that it's almost a cultural shift or a paradigm shift in what we're doing here. So, if it were just for the fact that we were spending too much on pencils and we need to cut down, we could cut it down and have to just deal with that. What we're talking about right now is the expectations that parents and teachers and administrators have for how a student is supposed to be supported. And that process right now is being handled through the IEP process, where there is an agreement about the need for one-to-one aid.
I understand that.
So changing that trajectory and trying to move towards a stronger transition model where we wean students, and it's not just weaning students, parents and administrators and teachers away from that has been something that's going to take a major shift. But you're right that in order for us to think about the independent as much as possible, living up as ability for the child to succeed after graduation, they're not going to have an aid with them the day after. So that part is, and then I think Leolanda can talk a little bit about the transition work, but we really have to think of a structure regarding, I think the structure by which we make decisions about one-to-one aids and how they are deployed, because we're going to face this resource issue, very soon. So I don't know if Yolanda can add on the transition side what is happening to try to get that going.
IEP and in need of one-to-one support is being supported by a winning plan. So that's part of the IEP documents. However, we have to
A
also
winning plan?
Yes, a winning plan.
Okay, tell me about the winning plan briefly.
The winning plan would be some sort of a goal or a set of activities that would kind of come up with a time frame also when a student is not going to be in need of one-to-one support. So there's a winning plan that is incorporated with the IEP. The other challenge that we have is that because of the IDEA law, that the students can avail of special ed services up until they are 21 years old. That's the other challenge that are we being faced of. We have some students who have received or completed graduation requirements, but because of this need more of achieving their transition plans for one, and plus the family or parents kind of, advocating for their child because of this law, the IDA law, we have a number of students that kind of stay in high school for more than 4 years. And we have somewhat a great number wherein most of the students who stay longer than 4 years are having one-to-one support. So that is the
Right,
challenge.
right. Because that would be reflective of the need for us to strengthen that transition program. Because if the transition program is actually working, they would not have a need to be there for an extra 4 years. I mean, an extra beyond 4 years, right?
And for the most part, the students that kind of stay more than 4 years are the students identified that would be needing lifetime support.
Right.
So that's the reason why.
Right.
They
But then
have
the
to
train,
retain
can we just go, let me just go back, because maybe what, and I'm basing this from personal experience. So I still have a grandson. He actually started here, autistic, non-communicative, could not communicate, and was very, just had unique needs, right? He had a one-to-one school aide here when he was, I think, in pre-K. When they moved to North Carolina and in Charlotte, so I asked, he's entitled to a one-to-one school aide. And they said no. He is not entitled to a one-to-one school aide because we have a plan. So they did have a program that specialized in autism within the district, but he was also mainstream in the regular class. So he actually started in the regular classroom. And do you know that he didn't, of course, as a grandparent, you're talking about grandparents, I was very nervous because I thought he's going to be bullied, he's not going to find his way, and then when they pick on him, he's not going to be able to communicate, right? And so then there. But you know what happened was this. The whole culture of the school, because they had that program, they didn't have the one-to-one school aides, the whole culture, the whole population looked out for those students with special needs. So when he had to leave, initially from the regular classroom, it was his classmates who escorted him to his classroom. Then eventually he learned how to go there on his own. But he has never had a one-to-one school aide in that school system. He is now taking the public school bus. Public bus. And he took of course they had, because he had to be bused in another district, but he's now taking public transportation, a bus, by himself. And yes, he had problems with the homeless, asking him for money, and he gave all the money, but you know what? He had to learn. And he had to learn how to report it to public safety, right? So that's all part of the life skills. And I'm just wondering, not trying to micromanage, but I'm just trying to say that if we created that culture within the school, whereby we believe that we can, that this child is not separate, and it's not, and can do it, then. So maybe a pilot?
I think that what Yolanda is talking about again is already part of that shift to. We're going to rename it so it's not weaning, but we're going to rename that, right? That's the concept.
I thought it was the winning.
The winning program, but
that championship.
But really, I think you were talking conceptually.
Okay.
So conceptually, it is removing the dependency. It is to try to reduce the dependency, and so I think conceptually, that's what it is. But what I mean, already that is the shift. But we're really talking about what you said, which was if you start in elementary school, the notion that now that your student, if your student does have a 1-to-1 aid, that you're not, the notion that your child should have a 1-to-1 aid all the way through 12th grade or beyond, I mean to graduation, is not necessarily in the best interest of the student, because what you're looking for is independence, and you might be fearful. I mean, again, we're talking about school safety, so it doesn't just apply to students with special needs, but any student, right? We're talking about some of the concerns about school safety for every child, but at the same time, from the standpoint of support for students with 1-to-1 aids, the idea is that the earlier you intervene, provide the supports, then you'll be able to mainstream the child as much as possible and reduce that dependency on a 1-to-1 aid as they grow older. And that's not just we talked about a culture change or a paradigm shift for those immediate stakeholders who are involved in the IEP process, but what you're referencing is also a paradigm shift for the rest of the school. So you'll see in some of our schools that they've developed a culture of students helping students,
Right.
and that helps reduce the need for. So some parents will say, we don't want a 1-to-1 aid. We know our child is safe because their friends are helping him, and that's a good thing to see. That's what we want to see.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. You want to go ahead and continue with the update here?
So we talked. So I guess that we jumped ahead to kind of talking about those.
To the 1-to-1. I mean,
right.
students with IEPs.
So I wanted to. So if we went back to number 1, we were talking a little bit about the training. So I wanted to just make sure you were updated with regard to the types of training that's happened since our December 4th. Some of it was already in progress, but have taken place, and I'll just highlight a couple of them. But you have that list. We are implementing a customer service training that is happening across the school district, and we're working on structuring that so that we can address issues, even if it's in my office. If there's no one answering the phone, we want a system to address it.
Yeah.
So right now it's more about training around expectations and about how we interact with our stakeholders. And there is an SOP associated with that, so if you would like a copy of that, we can provide it to you to understand what expectations we have set to address some of those concerns. I won't go through the details of this of some of this, except to say, as you know, one of the safety issues that came up over the last couple of months has been related to the bomb threats. And as a result of that, not only did we, I think it worked very well just looking at the partnership we've had with our Fusion Center and all of our law enforcement partners to come up with a way to address the particular situation that impacts our schools. But in addition to that, it's really training our employees to, as you can see, the incident command system training for our school attendance officers and other employees, training on the threat matrix assessment that we conducted, and on all sorts of training that we do with our law enforcement partners. But there's that types of school safety training that we've put forward. I wanted to point out on February 8th, we did have the Para-Educators Academy. And so remember we talked a little bit about the training that 1-to-1 aides receive, and so on that day I know that our chairwoman, St. Nicholas, and I went down to Estumbo Middle School to see how the Para-Educator Academy was set up and structured, and have an opportunity to talk to our employees and our division staff while they were there. And the way they set that up is, you came in as an employee, you had a list of, based on your student and based on your training, you were given a list of seminars to attend, and you were able to go directly to those and participate through the course of the day. So, if you would like, we can provide you if we haven't, did we provide the? Okay, so you have the right. So you have the what took place during the Para-Educator Academy, and then likewise on that same day, that was our full day PD. We also were working with counselors and social workers on 5-4 processes in ADAHI, which you just talked about, functional behavioral assessment. So there's some, we do as you know, a lot of training goes on in the department, and it's structured in a regular way. And I know just recently was very glad to see the counselors, the 1-to-1 aides at the schools go through that type of training, and you can have that list, and we can continue to provide updates on that front. The one thing I will want to emphasize is that the additional training that is upcoming and things that came out of our December hearing, just for our assurance, because we do provide the training, but maybe this is an opportunity to go deeper or to really reinforce the training, is in two ways. Number one is with regard to due process and with regard to our student conduct procedural manual, to make sure that we have reinforced and the training with both our principals and assistant principals. So whenever there's the issues of concern about how something was handled and how it was investigated and did they follow procedures, we wanted to just make sure that we tackled that head on and ensured, because as you know, we continue to see different new principals or new assistant principals. We said let's just take an opportunity to make sure we reinforce that training, so that we don't have this issues of questions about whether something was handled appropriately and not be assured that our assistants have had principals and the principals have had training. So that's on that segment. Number two, we talked about SROs, and again, not much of just an update. I mean, it's not a program that's easily expandable, but we are in discussion with the judiciary right now, who is our partner, about where to go with the program and how we want to, how we can improve. We've talked about how we might have our student attendance officers be a part of that solution with regard to visible presence on campus to help improve student safety and so forth. So nothing much to report on, except that there's a capacity issue there that we're trying to improve, but it's not something that we can easily expand from our 9 SROs, because a lot of that funding comes from our consolidated grant. The compliance with the school procedural assistance manual, I believe we interpret that to be the student conduct procedural manual. And again, we continue that I just mentioned, that training for principals and assistant principals. They receive that training on a regular basis, but our effort now is to reinforce it, make sure that we aren't giving it short shrift because we assume that they are already well aware of it. Based on the feedback we got at the last roundtable and ongoing feedback from the community, we're just making sure that all of our leaders are well aware of the expectations, and if they have any questions and need for support, to be able to have that conversation. And again, that also covers the implementation of PBIS and the issues we talked about with regard to school-based services that we're trying to address. With Teton High School, we talked a little bit about the need for school aids.
Can I just have clarification? The Tier 2 students, just with that has to do with the level of severity or severity, so...
It's actually the level of interventions that are provided. So after identification is done, they do an assessment to determine risk factors, what kind of services and supports need to be put in place. So that's part of what we're doing with the guidance counselors and the district psychologist.
Level of
interventions and supports.
So that's connected to the...
PBIS.
Yeah, PBIS and the severity?
Correct.
Of their...
So the number of infractions, the repeat offenders, etc. Yeah.
Before we continue, I really need to acknowledge the presence of Board Member Ken Chargala. Thank you so much, and I apologize. I keep looking at you, and I just say, "Oh, there's Ken." But thank you so much for attending. Okay, go ahead.
One thing I didn't mention, but I will go ahead and just add it in there because we did provide it in our response. Remember, we discussed positive learning centers. So this was our effort to as we address the alternative school and the functions of the alternative school, we wanted to just hint that, let you know that we are continuing to. I think it was formerly known as opportunity rooms, but these are the happening in the middle schools to be able to serve students on campus without removing them, but still have appropriate consequences for any misconduct. So
So are we monitoring that, Superintendent?
Well, it's in its first year of implementation. Plus, we want to supplement it with once we get our consolidated grant. So it'll help us to expand and then make sure we kind of structure those supports across the middle schools. And so we've had ideas about how we use online platforms for the students who are in those classes to be able to, while they're separated, still maintain their academic progress and so forth. So we're still in the midst of trying to figure that piece out so that we have across the board uniform expectations. But the whole concept is to keep them on campus not remove them from campus, but still have a way to effectively address their behavior.
So at one time, we had an opportunity room, right?
It's a similar.
At the middle.
At the middle school.
And it's
Way
fun,
back,
and it's,
yeah.
I think we're funding,
But
right?
we're not,
Funding issues.
Funding a teacher.
right. So that had to be staffed by a teacher, but I'm just not sure. See, we've had all of these ideas, and I think the reason why I'm asking you whether we're monitoring it is, and how we're doing that, whether it's, because our goal is to minimize the absences, or what are we doing? We're minimizing the misbehavior.
Right.
So
So
that it's an in-school suspension.
correct. It's so. I mean, it's an idea of how we balance the consequences and supports for
Right.
those students who might have. I mean, I guess the idea is that they would have been referred to JP Torres
Right.
under the original. I mean, under the previous iteration, and now we've stopped those referrals and said we've got to find a way to deal with them on campus. And so you're right that there's the challenge of making sure we provide a teacher and aides for the class, as well as keeping students who might be in different grade levels at different levels of progress, staying up to speed with their academic work. So, like again, what we've, the first, as with every type of implementation, it's the first level was providing the rooms and find the staff to be able to support those efforts. And now it's really more about structuring what's going to happen in each of those rooms, that we can look at from a system standpoint, and not just, every school having a different approach. So, like I said, the challenge has always been the personnel and the teachers, and be able to address each individual need. And I think that the notion that we might be able to use use technology to our advantage might be a way we move forward with the Positive Learning Center.
Yes.
Yeah, Dan Del Fiore with the Guam Federation of Teachers. It was briefly commented at the last roundtable, and I only reiterate for consideration that while this program is in the first year in tryout, the union has continually received negative comments that not all students, but some of these students that are particularly troublesome or repeaters are remaining on campus, so that the students and the faculty and support staff see students that otherwise would have before been removed remain on campus. So really, is there such a significant sanction for your wrongdoing if you go to another room but you're still walking around?
Well,
I only comment that
right.
that's a negative feedback we have
Right.
heard.
Well,
Yeah.
but you see, it could be a positive reinforcement for that student being taken away from school, because if they are not succeeding in school and their misbehavior causes them to be suspended or expelled, right? And not expelled, that would be complete. But the suspension outside of school is that the behavior could continue, because if they're not succeeding, then, then what are we doing? We're just getting rid of them. I think the challenge probably would be to really set the parameters for where those students could be. When they're still on campus, it could be on a wing, and their mobility would be limited to that area and closely supervised. Because I think that's probably
So if we think
that's
about
what I'm conceptualizing.
Right. If we think about the needs of the students overall, right? There are going to be students across that spectrum, and what we're talking about, at least to the extent that has come to my attention, is there has been concern about students for whom the Positive Learning Center might not work, and these are students who might be severely disruptive or threatening the safety of the campus.
Of other students.
Right.
Yeah.
So in those instances, that's where the partnership with our law enforcement authorities and judiciary is coming into effect. But we can talk a little bit more about how we utilize the expulsion policy to address those. We're really talking about a minority of students, and it has come to our attention that there are students where we are all maybe in agreement that being in the school is going to be such a major concern for the safety of others, that we have taken, more of a focus on that. So again, we can't go into the details of a particular, recent case, but it's come to our attention that sometimes these are matters before the courts. There are court orders involved. There are sometimes processes that we're implementing at the school, but not fully reinforced in the criminal. I mean, there's a lot of things that we need to work out and are really trying to work through to make sure that we address, these particular individuals who might pose a safe direct. I mean, that's what I'm assuming we're talking about.
That's
direct safety and health
the
issues.
Perception that educators are concerned about from students who might be borderline misbehaviors. Yeah, I only bring it to the concern when you're looking at the program and how to implement it, such as you said.
Yeah, so and so this is the first year we're doing this, right? So this is a kind of feedback.
But the question we're gonna
the
question we're gonna have, right, is going to be this: we have laws regarding compulsory education. We have systems in place to try to address the needs of all of our students, and the needs of the students again range from all across the board. And so what we've been trying to do is, this is the hard part, is because we're trying to differentiate the level of services that are provided. Because we know that if we capture too many people in one box, too many students in one box, the consequences could be, could go awry in terms, and I think that's what we were trying to capture in trying to make the changes that we've made over the past couple of years. Too many students leaving the system who didn't need to leave the system, who are now put out there without a diploma to try to figure out how to be productive in society. Some of them you see on the front page of the newspaper for one reason or another. We're trying to figure out who we can serve within the school system and still address the behavioral issues and still address their academic needs, but recognizing that there may be that minority of students that we're going to have such a hard time reaching that we're going to need the help of other agencies to really serve. And I think I made
the school-based mental.
Right. So I made that point last time that we need, we need those mental health services. We need the families involved. We need the police, the courts, whoever can be a partner to that, because there are students who have those extreme needs, who raise the challenge for all of us. And if we're going to kick the student around to different ages, that's one thing. What we're trying to do is grapple with the complexity of the problem for most of our students, by recognizing that there's going to be additional work needed for those extreme cases. And there's not a lot of them. They're not prevalent, but when they arise, we do know they, again, like I always say, highly disproportionately disruptive, and they need to be attended to. So we've worked through some cases here in recent weeks and months to try to, to help the schools and figure out how to address. But there's still some work needed around that. We can talk in detail on the details, but at this point, it's not really.
It's conceptually, it's a good idea, because, what we want to ensure is that all our students graduate and they're equipped, that they get over this hump. Hopefully it's temporary, because all of us have gone through some rough waters too, and thank God we made it to the other side. But, because it's just part of our development, it's just part of our human nature, right? So I think it's a really good idea, because when you describe your strategic plan, and our goal is that we have students leaving know how to resolve conflicts, they have problem-solving skills, and they have high ideals that can function. They can interact with everyone. So as we go through this, but I also recognize, Mr. Dan, that, like, for example, this was an example. When the air conditioner is broken in that classroom, and you're feeling the heat, you would want that intervention right away, right? You want the repairman to come. So that's clearly what the parents, the teachers who feel like things are out of control are really articulating. And as we are trying to move in a direction, not everything will be in place all at once, but I think the concept is really a commendable one, because eventually those students have to integrate and would have to learn how to get along with everybody else.
I think the different nature of our agency is that, what we try to do here is really take responsibility.
Right, exactly.
It isn't easier.
Right.
It's harder.
It's harder.
So to the extent that we get support in encouraging us to do what we're trying to do, I think it's to the benefit of our students and for better student outcomes. But I'll be very honest that what we're trying to do is harder to do than what we were doing before.
Right.
So, but I think it's the right thing to do. And so now that we can identify the particular issues that need further attention, then we should identify them and try to work together to resolve them. But it's easier to go back to the way we were doing this, and then but in the background, knowing that the students who are using our system will prepare and
It's just have them go,
they're going to show up
yeah,
at the front door the next
yeah,
day.
somewhere.
No, understand, and you said it's the first year, but be mindful that sometimes our society leans a little bit too far in favor of the wrongdoer in rehabilitation, and the majority and the parents and even the educators, because I attended with the superintendent a meeting last year of the GW teachers who felt a school aide had been actually physically assaulted on campus, and they felt a climate sometimes of fear because some students were still there that ought not to have been. It's a balancing. If your child is afraid to go to school because the bully is in the opportunity room, but at lunch or takes a bathroom break,
Well,
what are you going to do?
That's all part of the way, that's right, and that's the kind of information that is helpful for then the school and the school system to refine and improve those processes so that those students, when they're out of the opportunity room, somebody is always with them. And that when it's break time, they're not going to the...
Right. I just want to be clear about this because this is something that came back with regard to our efforts to put in place a threat assessment matrix, where they thought that when we said there was a low level of risk that we actually did nothing for it. No, it's even if we assess the different levels of interventions, there is a level of intervention that is needed, and we want to make sure it's appropriate to the level of risk. So it is not the case that we want an opportunity center room to put a very violent kid in, knowing that they're going to be on campus. That's not the case. So if that's unclear, I'm happy to discuss ways that we can make that clear. I do know, that's because at the GW meeting, that we did meet with those who were concerned about safety. But what was very valuable to me is the recognition by those teachers, and one in particular, that this is a community issue. That when you step out of campus, you're not any less safe or any safer, or less safe than you are at school. And so the recognition that we have to work together as a community to get a handle on these issues is very important. So for everyone to point the finger at the schools and say, well, you made these kids unsafe. Well, we're working our best and we're doing our best to try to address this, and what we provided to you is ways we can do that and ways we can improve upon what we're doing. I would say that if there's any notion that we are somehow trying to not deal with it, I think that's not the case, because we're taking on what I think are more difficult tasks, more difficult approaches to try to address
absolutely
these
not
issues.
that you're not dealing with it. It's just perceive or please receive these comments that maybe this approach should be rethought or modified.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
We're not.
No,
So that's-
I don't take it. I'm just saying that. I'm not saying it in that way. I'm just saying that that's exactly where we are. It's not really about we should go back to this model. It's say, okay, now we've identified those particular issues. We want to work on addressing, but all with the notion of making some forward progress on this. It's just going to be harder because we are now tackling head on what truly have been issues that I think we've ignored, which is we were now we have kids who are, if we can identify that minority of kids who we all agree we don't know what to do about these kids. Now we have to think through what are those services that we have to, or interventions or criminal components, or what is it that we have to do to address those kids, because that's really like that's the hard question right now, is that we think that we are covering the majority, but when we come with those incidences that we feel are very difficult, well, we have to recognize it's difficult and let's work together, because there's no one agency, I think, with those students that has all the answers. And so whether it's mental health services or interventions from other support agencies, whether it's greater accountability on the criminal side with our law enforcement agencies, I'm open. But I've told my staff to look closely at the expulsion tool when it's needed, because I don't think we utilized it in the right way or very much, because I haven't seen them come to my attention. And I don't support trying to kick kids out of school, but if it merits that, tell the school to go through the appropriate processes to recommend expulsion, so we can review the issues that are associated with those individual students and ensure they're properly addressed. So I'll get a bunch of them now from the recent bomb threats, I'm sure, but before that I wasn't getting a lot of requests for expulsion. And so, but I've said utilize that tool, recommend that tool if you think that's the appropriate.
Right. So it's
and
not
then
totally.
We have the tool. We just are we using
So,
it, and is it effective?
Yeah, we just need to. You want to speak?
Yes, Senator. I understand what Del Prairie is trying to say. The thing is, like I mentioned before, my grandkids, they do have this fear, and there's other kids that do have this fear because of the bullying and the beatings. It's having them there, seeing them there, even just walking by them, it does affect them. It's affected my oldest grandson already. Okay. I've asked to work with the principal. I'm trying to work with her. I pleaded with her, is there anything we can do about homeschool? Because my grandsons, they still have this fear. And it's so bad that it has affected my granddaughters.
So we can, so Mrs. Garcia, we can address that at the school level, or even now at the district.
What can I say? Because in just full recognition of the situation that she's raising, I'm not in with the particulars, is that is in fact the case, and that's why it's not easy. Just because individual A and individual B got into a fight and that happened, and you dealt with one and you dealt and the other, and maybe individual A is outside of school, it doesn't mean that there are other friends and other connections, right? And I think some of that is. Because even if you weren't involved in that incident, there could be some involvement or something happening at the school. At least I'm just saying from a generic standpoint that we might not have fully addressed the situation. So for instance, in gang-related issues, you might have two individuals who clash, and they may both be kicked out of school. Yet you still have the groups there where it could continue, and that's the hard part, because we're addressing case by case, and sometimes these issues involve more people and they don't happen all at the same time. So,
yeah. Okay. So it's so that's why the communication is just important, because we don't know how deep the cut is until you try to. Your interventions, right? So, but we just keep trying. Yes.
Senator, I'm willing here to work with the superintendent, even the board, and the teachers. But you got to help me too. I really need. My grandson is really going through hardship right now.
All right.
So
we made.
So Deputy Superintendent Cruz has been actively keeping track and working with the school. So if you could connect to, because she has the information, we just can't share it here as to what we understand the situation. And I will just admit it without going to specifics. It's a difficult one, and I'm not dismissing any of the issues you're raising. It's what happens in the aftermath of an issue, and it isn't something easily addressed. But I'd love to find a way to make sure if we're not connecting all the people who need to be a part of that. And we have our district psychologist here. We have Erica Cruz here, who's been actively following and checking with the school as to the latest. So I want to make sure we have the right information from you and the parent and kids, so we can make sure that anything that hasn't been addressed can be addressed. And so I'm happy to do yes.
I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Garcia. Thank you, Superintendent.
I think I'm going to to T's end, we talked about the aides. So there are 6 permanent school aides and 4 aides that we moved from schools and divisions that we determined were able to be moved.
Yes.
But we are requesting more positions in our budget, so you'll be able to see that.
So it was 143 minus 80.
Right.
Right? So the difference is what you're requesting.
Correct.
Okay.
There was a question about ADA compliance for
But I also need to let you know, right? You do have the lump sum budget.
Correct. And
Okay, so
I don't want to go through
yeah,
that
okay,
right
because
now,
that's
but that's another hearing. but
Okay.
right. Well, my answer to that is we have operational needs as well as the personnel needs
I
and past issues that we continue to try to address. But overall, I mean, really, we are running into a situation where we're making these choices and about how to keep the lights on, how to keep staff, and so it's a hard
Okay,
issue.
I hear you.
That's why our budget request didn't go down for next year.
Okay, and right.
The you asked about Raise of Hope, but I think that's been addressed. We met with you.
We've addressed Raise of Hope. Yes.
And then the status of the IEPs and noncompliance, we talked a little bit about, you asked them how many students are not receiving related services they're contracted to receive, and the only area there, and you'll see it there, is physical therapy. Is that correct, Yolanda? Okay. So she provided, and that's been because of a hard to obtain those services.
So one of the things that I had discussed, because I'm aware of this, is there was a time, I believe, that we actually had recruited from another country nearby.
Right.
When they had that. Is that still a possibility? Because if you don't have the human resources here, there's a shortage throughout the country. And so is that something that...
Right, so that's something that I'm happy to look at. I know you recommended maybe looking at that as a solution, so that's something we can talk about and see if we can,
because
if that makes sense.
It has been done before. And, okay.
So that's so that is the one area, and you've seen the numbers there. We talked about how we ensure that teachers read the IEPs. Well, we talked about the supports that we have at the school level, including our CRTs and our consulting resource teachers, and then our IEPCs, which is to support the process, and there are there's reporting requirements that are needed. So we talked about training, and we already informed you about training that's been provided and what we've provided since then. And then and I think that was mostly the follow-up from the last roundtable. I did want to talk about two things. I mentioned one of them was restorative justice training that is included as a part of our consolidated grant.
Right.
So we're hoping to have that approved so we can move forward with that. And the second issue is actually in partnership with the Guam Federation of Teachers. We were actually we wanted to go and we talked about a school safety survey. And I know Mr. Del Priori met with our Dr. Zenny Natividad and myself to talk about how we might approach that, because a lot of it came from employees and also parent stakeholders at the schools. My understanding is that upon review of the data being collected under PBIS for the school stakeholders, that much of that data we will continue to use to gauge the level of risk and the level of supports that are at each of our schools. But one area that we wanted to improve was a parent safety survey. And so we are working with, in partnership, to also gather the parent input, and I think it's scheduled to start in March. And so I can let Mr. Doper kind of talk a little bit about the details, but he and the GFT and DOE are working together to try to, I guess the whole intent of this is to gather a stakeholder survey of school safety so we can look at across the district what we're seeing in terms of the perception of whether our schools are safe.
Yes, very briefly, Senator. We have been meeting and coordinating on this, and this was a fruit of the last roundtable meeting, so these are positive steps. I think in summary I can best just provide your office. I can have it delivered where we are in our timetable for the survey. The superintendent has read the work that GFT and DOE staff have put together and approved it. Now we are preparing a memorandum of understanding how it will be implemented, and then we have the timetable, including translations into Chuukese and Tagalog to reach as many stakeholders as possible. And I'll have this delivered to your office today.
So the goal here is to try to complete the data collection by the end of this school year?
Yes, ma'am.
And then reporting it for next school year?
And yes, and being able to utilize it and disseminate it amongst those that will use it to improve for the next year. not only what is actually happening on the campus, because it also involves students,
Right.
educators, support staff, but also all that is perceived
Right.
as to safety. That's important too.
So I think at one time, maybe it was another institution, talked about the school climate. School climate, was that it's the same thing, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Okay, very good. That was incredible.
So that included the, at least the response to the status updates that were requested, so.
Well, I really, Superintendent, I really appreciate that. But you know what I've also noticed here is that there's a lot of research and data collection activities. So your research planning and evaluation is really quite busy, right?
No, they're very busy. Not only were they, over the last few months, we worked on both supporting the evaluation
Right.
of the superintendent, supporting, of course, the ASPER, the annual report on
Right.
student
That's
achievement,
coming up soon.
the school performance report cards, working on, there's so much going on, and then the state strategic plan implementation, setting annual benchmarks for implementation, and then every now and then the superintendent comes and says, "Can you work on this project?" and "Can you work on this project?" So, even the threat assessment matrix. I have to say that we utilized our RP&E support to really come up with something that made sense. So
How many
appreciate
do you
your
have in
recognition.
RP&E? Yes. Two. You know, and that division, she needs help, and
Right.
I think that division needs to be nominated for some kind of award.
Sure.
No, but seriously speaking, I do want to take note of the progress that you have made, and thank you very much for responding to our community, because this was a community concern, and you have systems in place that I have not seen. Very good, and I like the idea of having a school-based mental health program and services. PBIS is expanding. That's great. And, and it's amazing just how much you have accomplished in several weeks.
Well, the issue I think we're trying to do again is, from the system standpoint, putting in place the infrastructure to address all these concerns, but realizing that, as Ms. Garcia brought to our attention, that it has to translate into how every individual student is served. So, I feel comfortable that we've got a structure in place, and we have to really push to implement effectively and to pilot these programs and supports as effectively as possible.
Right.
But we really do need to get down to the level of the parent and the student to make sure that what we're doing makes sense when it involves those individual students. So again, Mike, I'm committed to continue that work, and I hope we can do that with Ms. Garcia today. But again, with every parent that brings it, with every parent that brings their student to our attention, we have to do the same to make sure that it translates to the student level.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. And again, everybody, congratulations. And I know it's real tough, but keep up the really good work. I mean, we now have students who will be very proud of graduating and will be more prepared. The institutions of higher learning are saying they're sensing that they are doing a little bit better, and in their entrance, and so we're really looking forward to just more progress. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add before we call for an adjournment and for people to go to lunch? Yes, okay. So thank you, and Sijuus Maasi for your presence. The roundtable meeting is now adjourned, and the time is 12:41. Thanks.